Now we will move to our very special fireside chat discussion on the topic of robust digital ecosystem for Self-Reliance India with Mr. Arvind Gupta, co-founder and head, Digital India Foundation. Hello and a very warm welcome to this special fireside chat discussion focused on creating a sustainable, scalable, secure, and robust digital ecosystem. I'm joined by a very special guest who has successfully transcended across enterprise techie to ardent advocate of digital for the public good. Ladies and gentlemen, I am talking of Mr. Arvind Gupta, co-founder and head, Digital India Foundation. Mr. Gupta is an electronics undergraduate from IIT BHU and an MBA and MS in computer science from the University of Illinois. He also is among one of the first few techie who worked on the Mosaic browser. His contribution in building a startup ecosystem and promotion of Digital India is well known. More recently, he was the CEO of MyGov platform with the Government of India. Mr. Gupta, thank you so much for your time and joining us. We observed that most of the sector went through some form of distress, but organizations that had integrated digital platform were able to mitigate the challenges smoothly. What has been your general assessment of the challenges vis-a-vis role of technology?
Now, Ankush, that's a great question to start with. We are living in an era, especially in India, where I don't call it a post-pandemic because, whenever we've called it post-pandemic, the pandemic has come back to hurt us. But I think we are in a stage of endemic. And what we have seen over the last 2 years is massive amount of ups and downs in the platform economy globally. But something that has stayed very strongly has been the adoption of digital in India. It has actually been an eye-opener, not only in India, but globally. So let me give you a brief about what we have seen as a trend in India. And you see, globally, you saw platforms like Zoom or products like Zoom really zoom up in market valuation in the mid 2020, 2021. And suddenly now they're back to their pandemic or just around the pandemic valuations. So they went through a very massive uptake and they're now paring down to normal, what is normal sea level. In India, if you compare, for example, 2 or 3 things, our smartphone penetration, our data usage has only kept going up. It's not come down. Even though we are in this endemic stage, offices have started opening again. In the last 2 years itself, I think, and this is a rough estimate at the back of the envelope estimate, that India itself has added about 10 crore people, 100 million people on the smartphone bandwagon. Some of them was driven with necessity, but these digital migrants have become digital natives now over 2 years. Schools became online, so people had to adopt to learning online. But what enabled all of this was a couple of things. The fact that India is the lowest data cost country in the world today, the lowest, I must say, and the highest amount of data consumption is happening in India. So if you see that one single fact, which really helped us during the pandemic, nobody ever associated India as a country where data could be at such low cost and everybody could be using it in a very, very digitized manner. And I think we adopted that very fairly, very, very, very well. Today, India is give or take at about 82 crore users on the internet, on the smartphones. And it's, again, India leapfrogged into the smartphone generation. We leapfrogged from desktop straight away to smartphones. So, I think that's one thing that is consistent, that is irreversible, that's become ubiquitous, and everybody is adopted to that. Now, what that has done is given a fillip to e-governance, given a much needed push to consumption on using a digital platform, whether that's entertainment or e-commerce or payments. Payments are, skyrocketing. Even February had a 28-day May month, but it's still probably beating the numbers from January. So, at 4.5, 4.6 billion transactions a month, it's a humongous amount of transactions. On an average, about 300 million Indians use some form of e-payments. That's about an average of over 12 transactions to 15 transactions a month by every single consumer using UPI. That shows you the wide breadth of the consumption story in India. And then coming to e-governance services, I mean, you see, and I'll give you a couple of examples. When the pandemic hit the worst and we didn't know what this pandemic meant, the Indian government, and this is due credit to the leadership in India, adopted the DBT to give this the minimum income support, a kind of support to every family in India. The DBT platform made sure that 80 crore Indians through their households got money in their bank account directly. Unlike the West, where you saw huge queues lining up outside food stores or for availing of food coupons, nothing of that sort. I think we prevented a lot of social distress because of our digital reach. And having bank accounts, having smartphones, and the whole Jan Dhan Aadhaar trinity working to support the government also helped. The last point I want to leave is that agile policy making. We saw immense amount of agile policy making. India is a country that is erstwhile known as with policy paralysis. No longer there was policy paralysis. The industry came up and said, we need the BPO and the IT industry, the ITES industry came up and said, we need business support because we support the global world, right? I mean, from India. And to do that, people were working from home. We couldn't show discontinuity. We couldn't show a weakness in our industry. And the Indian government came up with a policy of terminating the calls over the internet at home. And that became a temporary policy for 6 months, for a year. Now it's a permanent policy. So the agility made sure that the Indian IT software exports industry, the BPO software exports industry didn't hurt. And we, in fact, are expanding there. So due credit to the industry, for the workers in the industry who lived up to the challenge and worked from extremely difficult conditions, sometimes from home, managing multiple things and the pandemic, but made sure the industry expands. But also due credit is due to the government, which made sure that there were policies in place that enabled this great industry of ours, the software industry of ours, the flagship exporters of India, to really keep sustaining their growth and helping the industry. So that is, I think, the Indian story as far as the use of technology in the pandemic goes.
Absolutely, sir. As you rightly mentioned, DBT has played a really significant role during the pandemic and how it has helped all kind of people. So let me move to the next question. Since the days of digital locker, the Mobile Seva project, e-Praman, and the promotion of Indian languages in e-governance, the Digital India program has come a long way. Since you have been associated with it, in your views, what new ways can we experiment in Digital India from a policy or architecture point of view, which can give us the success that we have seen with UPI or maybe Passport Seva project? Could you shed some light?
Two are great examples. UPI is a completely digital platform. It's a network. In a way, I would call it a protocol for payments, which is helping a payment making completely interoperable. You can make a payment from me to Ankush, me to Khushbu, me to Shalini, me to a bank, HDFC to ICICI, and it's zero cost, right? At most of the times, and frictionless, completely frictionless. So that's what you talked about the browser, that how the browser got built over TCP. UPI has been built over the internet in that form. It is like virtualization of your payments. Today, everybody has a payment address, like you have an email address, and you can send money to each other from any app to any app. You are no longer living in walled gardens. Now, that digital public goods, that is what is the definition of digital public goods. The rails are public in nature. They are not owned by any particular person. So India has created an alternate model of which enables our national security, because financial security comes with it, payment security comes with it. Two, it is not dependent on any of the front ends. Front ends can keep going and going away. Let me give you an example. What is digital public goods with the context of UPI? Like SMTP, that's an email protocol. You may have Yahoo Mail, Hotmail becoming Outlook Mail, doesn't make a difference. As long as SMTP works, any client to any client, you can send mails. That's what UPI enabled, right? Now that success, the UPI success has been transformed into an approach thinking with the government of India that everything, we should build a lot more digital public infrastructure. So digital public infrastructure is being built in India in three manners. Number one, the connectivity, the access, which is the optical fiber network, the BharatNet program to every single Gram Panchayat, 250 lakh Gram Panchayat, 6.5 lakh villages of India, that everybody gets high-speed fiber connectivity, right? And secondly, is the whole approach of building these stacks, UPI, the Aadhaar stack, the eKYC stack, and then coming to the health stack. We are building the digital commerce stack. We are building the national skills stack, the account aggregator framework. So the government has suddenly got hooked onto this concept of building digital public infrastructure at population scale. So that's the second approach. And thirdly is making sure with the PLI schemes that's made in India for the hardware becomes a reality. That you have more and more hardware made in India, and it continues to be made in India. So, and that becomes more than cheaper, and becomes more accessible, more secure. Security is very important. And lastly, when the benefits of 5G will really happen if we really control this whole value chain from the hardware to operating system to the network. So I think that is the approach that the government is doing. So I think that's the key. That's absolutely the key.
Absolutely, sir.
So now, last point I do want to leave it. So where the program is going, that's the thinking of the program. That's the thinking of the program. So usage-wise, I mean, if you think about it, every government department today thinks, Aadhaar and UPI and MyGov or a DigiLocker approach. All the exam results are coming out on DigiLocker. So everybody's thinking digital first. This is the government. I'm proudly saying that digital is in their DNA, and it's an approach that I think everybody is understood. It's imbibing. The government procurement is happening on GEM. GEM processes more procurement than all the other e-commerce platforms put together. So many people don't recognize this small things, internal modernization as well external modernization the government is doing. So if you ask me, I think the biggest lessons I've already explained to you in these three big buckets, but the government is now a digital first government where digital is in its DNA.
Surely, the government is certainly digital first. So government is looking at revising the Information Technology Act 2000. In view of the changing landscape of tech space and making it at par with privacy laws, could you please throw some light on the possible amendments that we should aspire for?
Now I'll combine a few things. What is happening with the PDP bill, what the discussions you saw around blockchain and crypto, the central bank digital currency, the amendments to the IT acts, the social media guidelines that came in between under the intermediary rules. There's a lot happening. See, our IT acts, and this is another thing, while our policy making is very fast, our law making also needs to be as fast as possible. And it is a challenging area. Moore's law is applicable in technology more than anything else. It used to be 18 months the technology would change. Now I think it's changing every 9 to 10 months. You have drones coming out, and India is adopting that. The drone is something that I should mention. We are adopting drones like never before. So now, given this new world of IoT, the fourth industrial revolution, I think we do need to add a lot of new things to our IT framework, which needs to be relooked at from a fourth industrial revolution. It's no longer a line ministry. The digital will impact and is impacting every single ministry, every single work. Who governs a mobility company like Uber or Ola? It could be digital. There is a digital function to it. There is a Ministry of Transport function to it. Motor vehicles are involved. There is uh, the Consumer Affairs Ministry is because of pricing issues involved in that. And of course, there could be EVs and the environment side impact. So these technologies impact multiple ministries, and digital is the core of it. It's the underlying the vertical which ties up all of them. So I think what we need is integrated thinking across ministries, a lot more of a digital charter for India, fourth industrial revolution charter for India, rather than making only piecemeal rules and laws. Now this is very interesting when it comes to digital currency. This really comes to play when you think about digital currency, and then I'll talk about the PDP bill also. The digital currency is such an interesting thing because it has implications of taxation. Is it the currency issued by central bank is a currency? It's a digitization of the printed money. It's the most expensive instrument on this planet. But so central bank issuing digital currency is a very welcome move. That's what has been announced in the budget. But if you think about it, now this whole blockchain, the government has clearly shown intent on blockchain. In fact, first few certificates, skill certificates have been issued on blockchain. So the government is clear, blockchain is there for the government to adopt. There is a central bank which will come out with its own digital currency. The whole gray area around this crypto assets, and and that's where I give the greatest example is that you have crypto assets will now impact so many things. Money, Home Ministry from a security perspective, IT Ministry from a digital perspective, it's a digital asset. The Law Ministry from the legal implications, Finance Ministry from LRS, GST, the taxation side of it. Who governs it? Who will, how much of interministerial discussion and policy making is required for it to happen? I think will be, and of course, then there is RBI. So there's a lot of impact today digital has on everything. So that's why the government has been rethinking on some of these things in a holistic manner rather than in a piecemeal manner. And I think that we have to give the government the credit because policy making has been very fast, but lawmaking takes a time. And a great example is the PDP bill. The PDP bill was almost ready to be JPC had studied that, but suddenly the JPC has raised a valid point, which is now, can we also include non-personal data into it? So that instead of having two bills with two different treatment of personal and non-personal data, can we have an integrated approach? So I think it's going to take some more time, but it's the whole integrated approach to the PDP bill you're going to see soon. And India has a very tough challenge always. You remember that, Ankush, is that India is not something that will, is always looking only at regulation. We are a country which is on the up cycle of innovation. So we have to balance between innovation and regulation. Keep data privacy at core. That means data ownership is owned by the individual. But how can you use that data to monetize yourself, to give yourself better empowerment? A shopkeeper, a retailer can probably perhaps use data to get better credit. So to be able to enable data innovation, the data empowerment, we are coming out with this data empowerment and protection architecture. And the word says empowerment along with protection. Unlike some other countries or some other geographies which are just focused on the protection part, India has to balance between innovation, empowerment, and regulation. And that's where we stand. And I hope that answers your question.
Absolutely. So up till now, we discussed about how technology has been a game changer for us and highlighting some of the innovative e-governance services and programs. So let's talk about on the other aspect on privacy, data, and protection. So on personal data protection, which is likely to a key law that will govern how we deal with data. There are growing concerns around interoperability and precedents in relation to different countries having similar types of law for organizations working in different geographies. So in your view, how best our PDP can mitigate this? Could you throw more light on this?
In the absence of a law, in the absence of a data authority, we are all data products. You, me, everybody are data products. We consume so many of these so-called free applications and platforms, which none of them are free. They're using us as products. We are exchanging our data for that free thing, and in a way, whenever the product is free, you are the product, right? So remember, and that is what has happened to us. We really don't know what kind of data um, sharing or data gathering is happening on our phones, basically on these smartphones that we all have. How do we restrict that? Couple of things. The government has shown intent. When we banned a host of Chinese applications, we saw data being misused, misinformation, data being used as a weaponization against our own citizens. So we were very strict on that. So whenever there are national security implications or there are these predatory loaning applications, we've come down strongly and banned that. But having said this, still today there are a lot of apps doing omnibus permissions, taking so much of data, maybe not using it for misinformation, but definitely using it for personal gain, unethically, from the app's perspective, showing us ads which are targeted, showing us content which is targeted. And you saw a little bit of tweak that Apple did, and Facebook lost $10 billion of revenue. So this is how much of a protection that Apple did, and it caused so much of less revenue. So India is really against a lot of headwinds trying to come out with a very important data protection architecture. And that data, the PDP bill or the data protection bill now will enable that, which really secures the purpose. It makes a consent-based architecture, what you can take and what you cannot. And if you're taking it, what purpose, you have to define the purpose. And so citizens then become more in control, consumers become more in control of what data gets taken away from them and for what purpose. And it's a lot of informed choice. And that's the whole intent. That's the whole thinking behind what we are doing.
Okay, let's move on to the next question. Thank you so much, sir. One of the biggest lessons that government technology leaders have learned during the pandemic is that they need resilient IT infrastructure that is able to mitigate challenges like pandemics and ensure workflow continuity. In your view, what should be the focus of a government leader while they are making future IT investments?
I alluded to that earlier, and I will again repeat a few of those things. Number one is we need to control our supply chains. We need to control our supply chains so that we can take, the shocks are internal, not external. Secondly, we need to ensure the security of a secure supply chain. That means we control the hardware, the operating system, the app ecosystem, and the networks. And that will really make our whole supply chain very, very secure going forward, our data supply chain also. And then we need to have enabling policies and rules around it so that anyone who's found violating it can be banned or can be removed from the ecosystem. Going forward, we'll see a lot of this. Going forward, there's going to be a lot of the other thing, that battle that India is facing in general, apart from all of this, is this whole misinformation, fake news, this whole weaponization of data and information. How do we counter that? We are seeing as the Russian-Ukraine conflict is going on right now, that both sides are churning out so much of misinformation that we don't know what is true. So I think as we go forward, we have to understand that we need to protect our data. We need to make sure the consumers are protected, the citizenry is protected, public disorder is not created using misinformation and weaponization, ethical use of AI, transparency in algorithms and platforms, neutrality of platforms is going to be desired as we go forward. And ethics and trust will play a lot of role as we move forward. The last thing is, technologies coming out of democratic countries like India will be adopted a lot more globally. And, while the Silicon Valley will solve for the top billion, India will solve for the next 6 billion. I've always said this, and this will remain the core of our priorities as a nation, as Digital India, as Startup India, as Solve for India, Sell to the World, that approach.
Thank you so much. So probably the last question, and let me move back again to the kind of little bit of P2P discussion that we had. And this question is related to that only. How are PDP will be interoperable between different laws like GDPR, California Privacy Act? How companies working in these three geographies manage three different laws in different regions?
Oh, well, these are technology companies. They manage a lot of policies which are localized. They have to manage that. That's what tech does. India. It's not up to India to make our laws interoperable. It's up to the platforms to make sure that they obey to the domestic laws, the local laws, and the local governance that is desired of them. If they want to operate in the geography, if they operate in Europe, they follow the GDPR. So we are hopefully coming out with one of the more forward-looking laws in the world. And while we are doing that, it will be up to the technology companies, the platforms, to obey the local laws. And then I'm sure they have enough technical capability and technology available to them to be able to manage geographically. Today, if you go to Europe, I just visited Europe last week, and when I was there, the same apps were asking for different permissions every time I use them. So I think codification, using of location-based codification, geotagging, geolocation-based codification is pretty simple, and all these platforms should be able to achieve that.
Thank you so much, sir, for patiently answering all the questions and giving more information to our viewers and to all of us. And it was wonderful talking to you and discussing some of the very valuable topics. We talked about host of e-governance services that have been seminal during the pandemic, and of course, how they have rescued us during that phase, and adoption of digital technologies at large, and some of the challenges, and moving forward, what could be the right approach for the government and for the technology leaders. Thank you so much once again. Thank you, Mr. Gupta, for sharing your views on robust digital ecosystem for Self-Reliance India and a host of other issues that is relevant